Going live in 3, 2, 1. Jamar Chase has struggled mightily since being drafted. Is it time to panic in Dynasty? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. Chris, are you panicking?
No, no, no.
Are you sure? Are you sure you're not panicking?
Why
Are
do we
you
have to?
okay?
Why? No, I'm not okay. Like, why do we have to panic over every single piece of preseason news? I swear to God, I'm wondering if this is why film grinders wind up getting mad at fantasy players because we react, and I'm a part of this community too, where we wind up overreacting to the tiniest bits of data that we get, and then we just interpret that data in the wrong way, and then we wind up using that to project any of our priors onto that player, and then it's just like now we need to panic sale and all of that comes with it. Because if anybody had gone back and actually looked at not even just the tape, but the metrics associated with Jamar Chase before he came out, excellent prospect. Please do not get me wrong. Statistically, and then also from a film perspective, he graded out well, but it's the parts and pieces of his game that have shown up over the last 2 or 3 weeks that people have just really glommed onto to say that, well, now he's not this Amari Cooper level talent that we all projected him to be when he was taken in the first few picks of the 2021 draft. His separation was not a part of his game at LSU. Like, that was not his thing. Anybody that had actually watched him like back in college could have told you that exact same thing. Like, that was not his thing. And then now on top of that, we now have the drops are now a part of the issue. And we are getting reports out of Cincinnati about his confidence level kind of being shaky at this point as he's had to adjust. I'm sorry, but I can't believe for 2 seconds that y'all really thought that not only are we looking at not just a young prospect. I get that we've watched a number of like young receivers come into the league, but a young prospect coming into the league that hasn't played football in over a year, and you were seeing him struggle and adjust to the game after being out of the game for 20 months, 21 months. I'm not sure what everybody really expected out of this particular situation. And it's just when we're hit with that reality, instead of ingesting the information, looking at the context of the situation, just saying, oh yeah, I can kind of see that. This all kind of makes sense. It's no, he's not creating separation. And because we all know that separation is like the key metric for a good wide receiver. So if you can't do that, you can't play. They should have drafted Sewell. I mean, of course, that debate will go on forever. They should have drafted Sewell.
Well, then Penny Sewell gives up a sack, and it's like,
shouldn't have
took both. Shouldn't have took either of them.
But it's just like there's just so many reasons now that people want to get. People have been wanting to be upset about the pick. So unless Chase came out and he was essentially, Jerry Rice or Randy Moss right out of the gate, then there would be a complete overreaction in terms of the criticism associated with not just Chase the pick, but Chase the prospect. And now we're seeing that kind of come into the focus for not just fantasy, but also for just real football. Now that the media now has a legitimate not a legitimate story, but just a storyline that they can start to pull at a little bit.
They don't have to generate themselves anymore.
No, because the player himself has admitted the confidence issues. Other players around him, Tyler Boyd has talked about having to talk with him. For me, I'm just like, from a dynasty perspective, I do not care, not one iota. If this now makes Jamar Chase available via trade,
we talked about it last week.
Let's talk.
I danced around it. I couldn't bring myself to say that he'd be at a discount. Now this week's storm came about. I still don't think that I could actively advise you to go try to seek a discount on him. I don't think anybody that actually rosters him is silly enough to do so. But let me ask you before I get into it: is he still your wide receiver one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
who else? Who are you going to put in front of him? Who are we putting in front of him?
But even if there was a better case for like Devonta Smith, if he was lighting the world on fire, he still isn't nearly the prospect that Jamar Chase was, which I'll get into right now. There's the one category of dynasty manager that you just discussed, which is the react to everything, which is basically the redraft dynasty manager. But there's also another whole sector of Dynasty Manager that is the exact opposite, that won't react to anything. And that becomes a problem as well. This is coming from someone who has N'Keal Harry on every single roster. I should not have N'Keal Harry on every single roster, but every single time something bad happened, I made excuses for N'Keal Harry and said, you guys are silly. Why would you be reacting to that? And then I would scoop up N'Keal Harry for what I thought was a discount, and then it would get worse. And I'd be like, yeah, but he was a first-round pick. And then it would get worse. And I'd be like, yeah, Patriots offense is tough. So I keep making excuses for him. So there's two different sides, and you really don't want to fall on either. What you need to do is take the information that is reactionary information and then decide, is there context that supports this? So let's talk about the context with Ja'Marr Chase. The context is that he took 20 months off of football because there was a global pandemic. So what does that mean? He probably got faster. He probably got stronger. Maybe he improved on his routes because he wasn't a bad separator. It's just that he was great at everything except for separating. So it's like separating isn't what he's known for because he's so great at everything else. So maybe he's a better separator now because maybe he is bigger, stronger, faster because he spent that time. He didn't sit on his couch. He was preparing to be a 5th overall pick in the NFL. But what didn't happen is full contact, in-game situation, the mental side of it. I would like to think that he brought in trainers to do things like that, but there was no way for him to replicate LSU in season. So when he comes out to play for the Bengals after the 5th overall pick, context should have told us that this was going to happen. The drops are a little surprising to me, to be quite honest with you, because I'm sure he was catching balls for the last 20 months. But again, he wasn't catching balls under the lights at LSU, and he wasn't catching the ball under the lights in even Bengals preseason. Okay. So it's a huge difference coming from working your tail off, presumably, in your hometown and coming to play for an NFL organization. So I like that he's acknowledging this, that he has these struggles, especially since he's admitting it's a confidence thing. I hope he can get over that. Like Hayden Hurst got the real yips. I know somebody reported something along the lines of Ja'Marr Chase is dealing with a case of the yips. The yips doesn't go away, man. Like that means you're done. That means you pick a new sport. So I don't think he has the yips. I think he's a 20-year-old dude who is phenomenal and has to adjust to an NFL. Now, when we can go back to talk to the people that you were mentioning at first, the very reactionary people, and if you talk to them right now and you say that Justin Jefferson is Ja'Marr Chase's at least close to see, I mean, technically Ja'Marr Chase's ceiling is higher than Justin Jefferson's if we want to get into it. But if I tell you right now that Ja'Marr Chase's ceiling is Justin Jefferson, they would all scoff at you because they're so reactionary, just snap of the finger reacting. But if I told you that before the preseason started, you'd say, duh. In 2020, with the most prolific offense in college football history, Ja'Marr Chase outproduced Justin Jefferson by like a solid amount and was clearly Joe Burrow's favorite receiver. So Justin Jefferson should not even be Ja'Marr Chase's ceiling. Justin Jefferson should be somewhere about where Ja'Marr Chase should fall, which is incredible, which is why Ja'Marr Chase is the best prospect since Amari Cooper, and probably even a little bit better than Amari Cooper was coming out. Maybe just a little, but I mean, it's incredibly close, which is a great compliment to both players.
Sure.
So the point being, if you have to do that mental exercise just to keep yourself in check and say, what would I say to myself 2 weeks ago? If it changed dramatically since then and there really hasn't been much except for drops in preseason games, you probably shouldn't change your evaluation too much because there's not been enough context to really overcompensate for the context that you have, which is 20 months, no team organized football.
Right, exactly. And I can't for the life of me think about who you would be trying to trade him away for at this point in order to recoup any value that you would have gotten if you wound up taking, because Ja'Marr Chase was essentially going, what, the 105 in Superflex leagues?
Superflex, right.
Thereabouts, 105, 106. So I'm not sure what you think you can get for him in order to even feel like you've gotten 75 cents on the dollar at this point. So taking that news and reacting to it in such a way that you're forced to sell him away, it does, to me, that doesn't make any sense. And I mean, please go and get on out of here with this. Auden Tate might be taking some of his snaps early.
I was so excited to hear Auden Tate.
I mean, now please don't get me wrong. I am a Auden Tate stan.
Me too.
But when it comes to him pushing Jamar Chase for playing time, the Auden Tate last season was battling with Alex Erickson, and Mike Thomas, the bad Mike Thomas, for snaps last season.
The good, bad Michael Thomas.
So get on out of here with all of that. Like I get Auden Tate has like a fairly high contested catch rate. He can like pull out some of those acrobatic catches and all that. And the highlight reels for Auden Tate can be somewhat tantalizing. But please do not try and sell me on the fact that Auden Tate can now push a guy like Jamar Chase for legitimate snaps throughout the entire season. Let's just go ahead and set that one on aside, and let's just go ahead and let's forget that report even happened, or anybody trying to pull anything more than what it is. It's Zach Taylor trying to push his number one wide receiver prospect back into the mental mindset that he needs in order to see him succeed. That's what this is. Yeah. That's all that this is. And to say anything else, I think at this point is really just trying to me at least, confirm priors that you might have had on Chase to begin with before he's even set foot on an NFL field. That, to me, that sounds like more of people that were saying that the Bengals should have drafted Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, any of those other guys before trying to take a talent like Chase, like at that particular pick. Which, if that was your feeling pre-draft, then that's cool. But to say that Auden Tate is now going to push him for Todd, I cannot.
You notice nobody says that they should have taken a different wide receiver there. Like the argument is
right.
There's always a bunch of players, but it doesn't.
They should have taken Kadarius Toney. That's who they should have taken, right?
It doesn't matter how bad Jamar Chase performs in the preseason. Nobody was willing to say that they should take a different wide receiver there. Like nobody's saying, why didn't they take Devonta Smith?
Yeah. But now, don't get me wrong.
We all know in our heart of hearts that Jamar Chase is the wide receiver one. He should have been. I mean, I know a few people that didn't have him as the wide receiver one, but like, okay, then you're getting creative. But I haven't had a more easy evaluation in the 10 years that I've done this than just saying, oh, okay, Jamar Chase is the wide receiver one.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Now, will this mean that will he struggle for – not struggle. Let's just say will his target share be lower at the start of the season? Absolutely. I could see him –
talked about last week, probably will.
And we can see him start off with, let's say, an 11%, 12%, somewhere in there in terms of target share to start the season. That's about exactly where T. Higgins started off his rookie season, about 12.5% target share like throughout the first 4 weeks. And then we saw how he ended the back end of the season, and that was without Joe Burrow at about a 19.5% target rate. I can see him sliding into somewhere in there where both him and T. Higgins are sitting at about 19, 20%, maybe bump up T a bit more, maybe 21, 22%.
I think he gets right over 20.
Yep. And then Tyler Boyd's probably sitting there at about the same amount. I can see that all three of them kind of sharing that workload like fairly equally. And then from a fantasy perspective, it's really just the one that's going to wind up earning more red zone targets, which I think could either be T or Tyler. Let's just see how Jamar Chase, like how he develops throughout the entire season. But there's in no way, shape, or form from a dynasty perspective is this moving me off him at this point. It's not like, and again, my question to other dynasty managers that have now wanted to move off of him, or they want to move him down their ranks, who is now moving up in front of him? Is it really Devonta Smith? Is it Rondale Moore? Or is it just the guys that aren't hurt? Like, are you really, I mean, where are you going from that perspective? Like, how does the logic hold that you now want to move Chase out? Who are you moving in order to fill that vacuum? Because it was a fairly wide vacuum. I can't remember too many other wide receivers that were going that close to the front end of the first round. It was essentially him, at least three picks until Devonta Smith at maybe the 108, 109.
Right.
So it's just, where are you making up that value now that at least Chase is being perceived as being a struggle, or at least being somewhat of a sell?
Sure. And if this were 5 years ago and non-Superflex leagues, Jamar Chase would have been the resounding 101. The only difference now in the past 5 years is that people have realized that the cheapest running back production comes in rookie drafts. So that's why the workhorse, quote unquote, running back, which Najee Harris probably will be a workhorse, but not always are these players that we push up there. The Rojos, the Pennies.
Sure.
We want them to be workhorses when it's time to draft. So we push them up our rankings with optimism. But honestly, it probably should have been Jamar Chase. Yes, it probably should have been N'Keal Harry, even though I took Josh Jacobs 1 overall. Thank goodness. But Jamar Chase probably would have been a slam dunk a few years ago until we started having this transition to really what I think is savvier. Take your running backs in the rookie drafts because it's really hard to acquire them after you've seen them produce.
Yeah. And I will go ahead and just punctuate all of this discussion with the fact that I'm a Bengals fan, just to let everybody know. I mean, I will go ahead and throw out this bias like right here and now and just go ahead and say that I defended the pick after the draft happened. And I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic. I've been saying this all off season that this winds up turning itself around. And even after the report came out about the shakiness in his confidence, actually Jamar Chase today, like we're recording this on August 23rd, Ben Baby of I forget actually which group that he works for, but he wound up reporting that Jamar Chase actually had a bounce back practice today, made a couple of those like twisting acrobatic like type catches, caught one for a touchdown during practice. So a much more improved practice like for today. So it's exactly what you wanted to see coming out on the heels of that report.
And if you read through the tea leaves, it is nice to see that every single time he's struggling, which has objectively been plenty this preseason, a teammate's been over there picking him up. So I've seen CJ Uzomah, I've seen Joe Burrow, and that's because they know he's great. Yeah. Nobody there is like, hey, rookie, carry my pads. Mm-hmm. They're like, you're going to be potentially the face of the NFL one day. Like, get it together, kid.
Yeah.
So if you're listening here, you know that we're coming from the mailbag, from the Football Guys mailbag that comes directly to your email. If you have subscribed, if you have not subscribed, go over to footballguys.com, subscribe to the email listings. You'll get news for right now it's injuries. I mean, I'm up to date on every single little injury, every single nick, especially since I'm drafting so much best ball right now. I'm doing 3 to 4 drafts a day, trying to get it in by the end of the off season. So you have to be up to date with those injuries. You can't be on the clock trying to make a pick and you take somebody who is out 7 to 8 weeks and you didn't know because you didn't get the email from Joe Bryant and Cecil Lammey and Sigmund Bloom that said, hey, this guy's out 7 to 8 weeks. So now you blew your $5, $25, whatever dollars you spent on Underdog Fantasy. And so go over to footballguys.com. Make sure you subscribe to the mailbag, the newsletter, and we take all the Dynasty content off that, bring it over to the Dynasty Newsletter, and we relay it to you if we think it pertains to Dynasty. So now we're going to get to more coaching malpractice that actually might end up affecting Dynasty, and it might affect a Dynasty. So Jacksonville Jaguars are still splitting time amongst Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew. Chris, this was like kind of funny, when it was minicamp and we had the season, a month away, and you could say, oh, they're making the rookie work. It's Trevor Lawrence. But you wanted to make the rookie work, whatever. If that's your new culture, Urban Meyer. We are a week away, Chris. What do you think about still splitting reps between Gardner Minshew and Trevor Lawrence?
I'm trying not to take too much into this because, as we mentioned, we're recording this on August 23rd. Mm-hmm. Their preseason game against the Saints is actually going on while we're recording. Mm-hmm. Trevor Lawrence got the start, played with the ones tonight, looked fine. So I'm trying not to read too much into this. But now I have to balance that with just the list of, let's just say, bad decisions, curious decisions.
Right, curious, exactly.
That Urban Meyer has made in his coaching tenure in the NFL, from the coaching staff hire that he made earlier in the season, which wound up with the guy essentially firing himself. He wanted Kadarius Toney.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that if you don't get him?
Gets in, starts digging into DJ Chark's chest about him playing small, wanting him to
receiver one, just dig right into him.
So drafts ETN, even though he has James Robinson. I mean, the list is just there for Urban Meyer. And even to kind of tack on to that, Travis Etienne has, at least so far throughout their preseason game tonight, has played very little with the starters tonight. It's been mostly James Robinson. So I'm confused.
With some Carlos Hyde sprinkled in.
Yes, with Carlos Hyde also sprinkled in. So while I'm trying not to take too much from this and thinking that the assumption of rational coaching will prevail in all this, everything else has kind of led us up to this point where it's just we don't know how this is going to wind up. But it's hard for me to believe that they're going to wind up going with anybody other than Trevor Lawrence at this point. So it's not changing my position on Trevor Lawrence or anything like that. If anything, though, I guess the one thing I could possibly take from this is that Gardner Minshew's not done in this league.
Sure. Which I'm actually happy with. I do think he has some juice to be a productive quarterback in this league.
Yeah.
Maybe a Ryan Fitzpatrick career arc.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I still think that there's enough juice left in the tank there for it could be one of those. They're showcasing him for a possible trade in order to possibly move him somewhere else. Who knows? But I think that if they wanted to do something like that, get him as many reps as possible, show him off during some of these preseason games, maybe get him in there, flash a little bit for the rest of the football community to see, hey,
shake the mullet around.
Yeah, this kid can still play. He can still put butts in seats. And then, kind of take it from there and see if any offers come their way. But at the very least, I could see a situation where, from a dynasty perspective, Gardner Minshew is one of those guys you would kind of want as your QB4, sitting at the back end of a list of, a couple of starters. Let's say you maybe throw your blue chip at one of the prospects that's come out over the last couple of years, and then you've got Gardner Minshew sitting there as well. It's not the worst of ideas, at least in terms of how backups go.
Sure. So this is the middle of the spectrum I was trying to talk about in the Ja'Marr Chase segment, where it's like you don't want to be too late to react either. So we keep putting building blocks together that this organization is just really, really bad. And you hope that they're bad enough to where it doesn't actually affect Trevor Lawrence too terribly much. Hopefully the experiment ends after this year and you get a functional organization in there next year, because coaches would be lining up to coach Trevor Lawrence. But it does get to a point where it's not like Ja'Marr Chase, where there's not another receiver that's pushing Ja'Marr Chase to be the wide receiver one. So he can struggle a bit and his value is not going to be affected much. I mean, we have Trey Lance and Justin Fields getting run too, and both of them have had their highlights. I'd actually argue that Justin Fields has looked more polished, I guess I should say, in limited action. But I don't know that Justin Fields has gotten work with the ones yet, though, and I know that Trey Lance just got some work with the ones. So all that to say, there's other guys on better organizations. I won't say that the Bears are a better organization because we could get into the same conversation with Matt Nagy.
Yeah.
But Trey Lance specifically, and there were a lot of people on the Trey Lance quarterback one train, even though Trevor Lawrence is, again, one of those generational, since Andrew Luck type guys. But there are people that read into the organization more than the player. And I can't necessarily say that that's a bad prospect evaluation, because Trevor Lawrence can control what Trevor Lawrence can control. Urban Meyer can control everything around Trevor Lawrence, which he has, because he brings in Travis Etienne, which is fine. Etienne's a fantastic player, but then doesn't play him.
Yeah.
And realizes that James Robinson is a fantastic player, which he is. So now he's struggling because you landed on Etienne when you said you wanted Kadarius Toney, which was so dumb to say. And then you don't even use Etienne how you would have used Kadarius Toney when you're trying to say, like, well, we got Etienne anyway, so we're just going to do some of that stuff with him.
Laviska Shenault is just Toney plus.
Sure, right. So then you don't do that stuff with him because Laviska Shenault is Toney plus, which means he's Etienne plus in that facet. Etienne's a fantastic running back. You already had like an amazing gadget player. You don't have to use Viska as a gadget player, but if you wanted to, he would be brilliant.
Sure.
And he was already on your roster to do all your mastermind plays with. And then you bring Etienne and then you don't use him. So really, we could just do a whole show on all the things that Urban Meyer's organization has done wrong already in his tenure, not even to bring up the whole Tim Tebow debacle that wasted a bunch of time and brought a bunch of attention you didn't need.
I wouldn't even bring it up. I wasn't even going to bring it up.
So the point being here is that I'm a little worried for Trevor Lawrence's early development, not at all worried for Trevor Lawrence.
No.
I would have to think a little. I do think Trey Lance is going to play really soon. And if he's going to play really soon and he's got the dual threat ability, which I know Trevor Lawrence has some of that dual threat ability. Don't come at me, but he does not have Trey Lance's dual threat ability.
Mm-hmm.
And he's attached to Kyle Shanahan, and he's got John Lynch at the helm instead of whatever the heck is going on in Jacksonville. If I'm taking a 15-point a year difference to not deal with the headache, might consider taking Trey Lance and just not dealing with whatever Jacksonville's got for the next 3 years.
I just can't with that whole. I just want the games to start. Let's just get the games to start, and that's when coaches and teams will be pressured into making at least what we think as of right now.
Point.
Sitting back in our office chairs talking about this stuff like we know what's best, but from a rational standpoint, let's at least get the games going so that the hope would be that they're kind of forced into doing the right thing, which would be starting the guy that you spent the first overall pick on.
They're going to start him, but then you wasted all that time. Even like he's missing real practice time. He's missing real reps.
But then also finding a way to integrate the running back that you also decided to draft when you also have what most folks, not just fantasy folks, would also consider to be a good running back at the position. So yeah, that's what I think that's what we need at this point, because since we were just talking about the Cincinnati storyline beforehand, it's just the preseason stuff is what gets us to make some of these like suboptimal decisions, because this is all the information we have at this point. We don't have actual game data. We don't have actual tendencies to hold on to and to say, well, yeah, Urban Meyer is having Gardner Minshew take some of the first team reps, but we all know that once Sunday comes around, Trevor Lawrence is going to be under center.
Right.
It makes the most sense, or even once we start playing the games, James Robinson will mix in. We'll probably might get a dash of Carlos Hyde, maybe at the goal line or something like that. But Travis Etienne is going to get at least 50% of the work, and maybe
we'll see
4 or 5 targets or something like that, because we've seen that workload happen to him beforehand. We don't have any of that yet. So until we get that, this is really all we have, and it's just going to make everybody either super happy because they invested in these guys or faded these guys, or other folks. I think the overall takeaway, though, is that it presents buying opportunities. It really does. It presents those trading opportunities that if you happen to miss out on one of those players, you happen to miss out on a Jamar Chase, hey, now's your time to take a swing. You want to add a guy like James Robinson onto the back of your roster. Might cost you a little bit more, but hey, now's the time to take a shot at one of those guys that may or may not be falling in managers' ranks because of the things that people are reacting to right now. Or like, let's say DJ Chark absolutely has to be tumbling.
He has Visca in best ball is like 3 rounds ahead of Chark now.
Yeah.
And it started the off season as Chark being 2 rounds ahead of Visca.
Yeah.
So, yes, it is tumbling, and really for not much reason, actually, because he fixed what Urban Meyer complained about. So I don't really understand what the issue was. But yes, that is an excellent buying opportunity on probably not James Robinson anymore, because people are keyed on to the chaos that we just discussed. But TJ Chark is an excellent target for the Urban Meyer hate club. I forget what podcast I heard this one earlier in the year, but our discussion made me think of this. So somebody was talking to an old quarterback, and tell us in the comments if you remember. I heard this. I know everyone else heard this podcast, but he's talking to an old quarterback and asked why you didn't get any reps in practice. And he said, well, if the starter goes down, we're done. So what am I taking reps in practice for?
Oh, yeah. Was that the one when they were talking about Peyton?
It was either they were. Yes, I do think that they were talking about Peyton.
Yeah, I think that was around like Hall of Fame time, and they were asking about that. Yeah, because they said if
someone
18?
backing up Peyton. Yeah. Oh yeah. If 18 goes downward, there was a different word than done.
Yeah. I remember that quote. Yeah.
Yeah, that made me like So Gardner Minshew is really going to take 50% of your reps when Trevor Lawrence is not even your best option in week 1, but like your best option for the next 12 years. Okay, well, fantastic start. Okay, well, if you're listening here, then you're a fan of footballguys.com, and you probably enjoy going to the website app. But you can also check it out on your phone with the Draft Dominator. So go to iOS or Android Marketplace and check out the Draft Dominator from footballguys.com. You'll get all the same stuff. You'll get our articles. You'll get help through your draft. There's a lot of interactive tools for you to try. So definitely go check that out. Just used it on my last draft. It's been phenomenal. So go check that out. And if you're feel so inclined, please leave a rate and review. Last thing we want to talk about is something that's near and dear to my heart. We won't say that I have 33% Jameis Winston exposure, but I might have that much. Jameis Winston to get the start tonight, which he did, and he threw a bomb. This is important. Why? Well, because Sean Payton said that he's going to announce a starter before the last preseason game. I believe Taysom started last week. Wasn't too terribly impressive because he's not exactly a quarterback. He is, but not exactly. And then Jameis Winston came in, and yes, he'll probably throw 30 interceptions, but he'll probably throw 35 touchdowns. So he throws an absolute beauty to Marquez Callaway on the first drive, I believe. And I can't wait to go watch the rest of that. So this is important because we're moving forward, Chris. Moving forward in Dynasty. We're moving forward in the season. We're about to have real football. It's probably our last chance to acquire Jameis Winston when the writing's on the wall. Taysom Hill still has an outside shot because he's Taysom Hill, and we'll all remember Taysom Hill going in to steal Alvin Kamara's record for touchdowns for no other reason besides Sean Payton loving him so much. What did Kamara do? Still went out and tied the record because he's Alvin freaking Kamara. So Sean Payton has all the love in the world for Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill's not going to be a happy camper, as he has stated many times in quotes this offseason, if he is not an actual quarterback. There's a lot going on that could make him have an outside shot at being the starter, but I think it's Jameis, and I think it might be time to try to buy him from anybody who is still weary over the next 7 days.
We'll see. I mean, tonight will probably change. Actually, not probably. It will definitely change everything, at least our perceptions of the Saints offense, because they could approach it like a platoon. Taysom could be the starter because they wound up paying him. And I know this is wrong, but the $100+ million contract,
140, 3-year, 140,
right? All those things that would put breadcrumbs in front of some people and lead them to believe that it's going to be Taysom Hill. And as of right now, there hasn't been a definitive word, but I would say that Jameis Winston dropped the mic on Taysom Hill tonight regarding who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Saints. But we'll see. We'll see how this entire offense reacts. We'll see how Sean Payton wants to, I guess, have their team be piloted by whomever, like after tonight. Regardless of the case, I almost like the Gardner Minshew case I was making earlier. You can make a decent case for having Jameis Winston as your quarterback 3. If you think that his situation is tenuous enough that at best he starts, let's say, half of the games this season, at worst, let's say at worst he starts like half the games this season, and then afterwards they're forced to figure it out, or he winds up moving to a separate team or whatever. There's still nothing to suggest that he's going to be essentially out of the league by the end of this season. Similar to like we were talking about with the whole, exactly. We could just like we were talking about with like the Ryan Fitzpatrick arc. I could see the exact same thing happening with Jameis Winston, where even if it doesn't work out with the Saints, there could be a number of other teams that could wind up calling on his services for a reduced cost. Are we really thinking that Tyrod Taylor is going to be able to stick it out with Houston, and Davis Mills is actually the answer to some of their issues?
Get any starts? I think they're already done with him.
Exactly. So they might need another 1-year bridge type situation in order to get them over the hump for the next season, as they still figure out the Deshaun Watson saga. And that could be Jameis Winston. You can talk yourself into a number of other places that could wind up working out for Jameis. But the point is that he should still be in the league. You can still get him for half to 3/4 of the starts, depending on the situation. So having him as your QB3, QB4, if you have a number of other, let's say, well-established starters, and then he's just kind of that guy at the back end of your roster, similar to how, let's say, Ben Roethlisberger probably operated in years past, but you want to recycle that back end of your roster for at least a newer quarterback, or at least a quarterback that has a little bit more upside. Jameis Winston, I think, falls into that category at this point.
Sure, and it's the same conversation we've had a million times this offseason on Cam Newton. It's that he's been left for dead in Dynasty, and he's only 32. And he was clearly not right last year, whether it was the COVID, the shoulder, the ankle, any number of things. He was bottom caliber last year. There's no way he could be worse. There's no way Jameis could be worse than he was last year because he wasn't starting, and then he didn't even get the start for Drew Brees. And so in both situations, you're talking about young quarterbacks that have shown a ton of upside in this league, that have opportunities this year to show that they still belong. And if they do show that they still belong, then you just hit the jackpot in a Superflex league that is nearly impossible to acquire quarterbacks in. And if they don't, what was the opportunity cost? Not a ton. I mean, in Superflex, probably talking about a mid to late second. I mean, that kind of hurts. If your mid second was Elijah Moore, but if your mid second was like Brian Edwards 2 years ago, like, okay, we hope for some spark, but like that's not going to burn your bridges. So if you have the capital to invest in a Cam Newton and a Jameis Winston, you do it right now. And especially with Jameis Winston, you do it right now, as in like after you listen to this, because by next week he's announced the starter and this all goes away. This whole segment becomes null and void because now he's the starter and he could be the future of the Saints. I mean, that had to have been a conversation when he gets his second contract with the Saints. He came there to learn under Drew Brees. He said, I have a lot of problems. I need to first correct my vision. So he's LASIK Jameis now. But then
post LASIK.
But then I also need to learn how to be an accurate quarterback. So where do I go to do that? Oh, maybe the quarterback that holds like all the records for quarterback accuracy. Maybe I'll go learn under him. Brilliant career decision. And then he gets another contract with them. Said, okay, I liked it here for my last year. He could have went elsewhere. There had to have been a conversation that said, you produce for us, you win this job, you might be the quarterback of the future. Now, if you acquire the quarterback of the future for the Saints under Sean Payton, who's not going anywhere anytime soon, for a mid-second round pick, I mean, you just hit the lottery.
Yeah. No, I'm with that. I think that the best approach to guys like that who you think have some risk is to go ahead and assume some of that risk just because you know the upside could possibly be there. We're not saying go out and just try and pick up any possible backup quarterback. I'm not advocating for the Brian Hoyers of the world, Nick Mullins, or anybody like that. We just know that given their either mobility or upside or aggressive tendencies, so that would describe either Gardner Minshew or Jameis Winston, that the QB1 or low or like high end QB2 upside is a part of their game, and so that should be a risk that we can assuming that we also have multiple quarterbacks, let's say at the very least 2 to 3 in front of them, in order to mitigate some of that risk.
Right. So we just advocated for 3 quarterbacks that have all shown potential in the NFL. Obviously, one's a league MVP in Cam Newton, and are all on short contracts. Now, Gardner Minshew's contract, I think it's 2 more years because he was just drafted this year and next year, but they could easily end up releasing him, and he's shown that he can get the job done in the league. The other 2 are on 1-year deals, so they're going somewhere else next year, almost definitely, either way. So if they show some ability this year, to the moon for them. So the last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is just remember we're closing out on time for the FFPC Players Championship, $350 buy-in tournament style, $500,000 for prize pool. And if you've been listening to these shows, it's probably a good time to go over and test your grit before the season's up. So FFPC Footballguys Players Championship, go over, check that out, $350 buy-in. You have anything else for us today, Chris?
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a gentleman by the name of Alan Moulter. I had the pleasure of meeting him down at a draft event that I recently attended down in Kentucky. It's for the Southern Bluegrass Fantasy Football Conference, if I'm remembering the acronym correctly, run by Dr. Brian Harwood. Down there for this weekend, drafted with a number of folks. Sat right next to Alan, who is a Football Guys subscriber, listens to this show, so I wanted to give him a quick shout out. I mean, appreciate being able to draft with him. Met a couple other folks while I was down at the event as well that have also been, longtime avid fans of Football Guys, listening to Sig, listening to Cecil, so many of the other just like the great names of Football Guys. And so just being able to tell folks, hey, I collaborate with Football Guys. I work there. I'm not on that same level as those other guys, but I get a chance to maybe talk with them or see them talk, in base camp every now and again. So it was pretty cool to meet actual like legitimate fans of Football Guys. So it was really great. So I want to say hey to Alan real quick.
Chris shoots me a text and says, hey, I'm sitting next to somebody who listens to our show. That's one of the coolest things that you can hear.
Yeah.
If you go to an event that's like other creators, then it's like, okay, well, they probably heard your show. But to hear like an actual person who utilizes our content, it's just puts a huge smile on my face. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate all of you for coming out and listening. And please, if you feel so inclined, like, subscribe, rate, review, and hit that notification bell so you can see when we're going live. We will catch y'all next time.
Peace.